You're there for a purpose. You're the expert in the room on whatever subject you are giving them. You should be not only giving them your all, but you should be excited about it and you should be purposeful. So focus on the purpose and remind yourself you're the expert in the room. You may be the only person that can give them that kind of information in that moment. We want that conversation to be interesting, and we want it to be something that will have our audience learning or gathering information. There's a reason they're there, and we don't want to ever let them down. I like to think about the audience as the third person in the conversation, be it if you're giving a speech, if you're making a presentation, if you are doing an interview, if you've created a video, whatever it is, you must know who your audience is.
Jane Hanson is an Emmy award-winning television journalist and a communications coach who has spent the last 3 decades helping people learn how to communicate better. She has spent most of her broadcast career at NBC New York, including anchoring Today in New York, appearances on The Today Show, reporting on every major event from the tragedy of 9/11 to the joy of Yankees victory parades to Wall Street in Washington. And I think the point here is we are talking to an individual who knows how to show up and present powerfully, who knows how to show up as her best self, who knows how to get herself into that peak state when she needs to before she delivers a message or before she makes a post or before she presents herself in front of a group of people. And this message is going to be important whether you are a business owner, entrepreneur, you're in the company world, you're in the corporate world, whatever it may be. If you speak, if you communicate, if you have the verbal capacity to make sounds, then this conversation with Jane Hanson is going to be for you. Jane, I'm excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that intro. You kind of said it all. Do I really need to talk?
Well, this is why I definitely want you to talk, because you have a long, extensive career that is continuing and you're in the prime of it now and you're only going to keep getting better and better. But you have adapted a lot, I'm sure, over the last 3 decades in this world of media. And you've interviewed presidents, you've interviewed celebrities, you've interviewed people from all different walks of life. And I'm assuming that the conversation with each of those individuals was different based on who you were speaking to. But first, I wanted to commend you for your career in this field and really adjusting and pivoting when it was necessary.
Thank you so much. And what you really just talked about is something that has happened a lot to me over the course of my career. I began as a television journalist quite a while ago, more years than I care to admit. And I grew up in a little tiny town in rural Minnesota that didn't even have a stop sign. And then I began to broadcast from the streets of New York City. And I remember when I got a show of my own at one point, and they had giant billboards, and then I would film the show with in Times Square, and it would be behind me, and my family from Minnesota would call and say, "How'd you get up there?" So it's kind of it's just been wonderful, and I've had an amazing, exciting career. But there was a point, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, when I recognized that it was probably time for me to get out of that daily deadline, that hard news broadcast, that place where I felt like I just wanted to have my life back. And so I started to coach people about how to be great communicators, because I communicated every single day of my life. It was my job to do that. And my aha moment came when somebody would come off a set after I'd interviewed them, and they'd say, I didn't get to say what I wanted to say, because I led them down a garden path with my questions, and they never got back to why they were there, be it to launch a program, to talk about a book they'd written, maybe to talk about something else in their life. But I latched onto something that I thought my audience was going to love, because it was always about the audience. Mm-hmm. And they never got it back. And I thought, I know how to do that. And I can teach people how to do it. And so that's how this part of the coaching part really began.
Speaking of that, is there a good balance between that person saying what they came to say versus you giving your audience what it is they want to hear? Because we do have a lot of podcasters who listen to this and people in the corporate world who interview others as well. Like, is there a balance between leading and guiding that conversation versus letting the other person take the reins and do what they like with it?
you need to remember the prime reason why you're there. What's your purpose? So one of the things that we really want to always do is keep our audience engaged. We do not want to have a conversation, and everything is a conversation, no matter what you're doing. If you're a president giving the State of the Union address, it's still a conversation with the American people. So we want that conversation to be interesting, and we want it to be something that will have our audience learning or gathering information, doing something that there's a reason they're there, and we don't want to ever let them down. I like to think about the audience as the third person in the conversation, be it if you're giving a speech, if you're making a presentation, if you are doing an interview, if you've created a video, whatever it is, you must know who your audience is. And that involves some good prep work to say, I'm speaking to, thinking about gender, think about age, think about geographic location, think about beliefs, think about cultures, think about ethnicity, you got to think about all those things when you're putting together a presentation or getting ready to interview somebody or be interviewed. And so that line is, I can sit there as an interviewer and let you tell all these stories, but is it really a conversation? And look at your audience, gauge them. Are they getting anything out of it? Are they aptly interested? Or are they all on their phones? Because you want to keep them engaged. And there's one other little factor that's really important in all of this, and it's called attention spans. How long are they in the United States today, do you think?
Like 7 or 8 seconds, right?
8 seconds. Although I think it's probably down to 7 by now. I think there should be some new research done. That's according to Microsoft, who says that's a second shorter than the time it takes a goldfish to feed. Okay, so think about that. So and it's not that you've lost them completely. It's that there's that second conversation in our head that says, when's my next meeting? Or, oh, man, did I remember to lock the door? Whatever it is, you're a little distracted. And so that means we have to bring those people back in. And there's a whole bunch of ways that you can do it, including what I see you doing right now, which is changing the images. You're making me full screen, you're dividing us into two, you're full screen, blah, 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 blah. So it's really about how do I keep people's interest? And that's an important thing to do too.
100%. I remember one of the best pieces of advice, going back to one of the first things you said, is I was starting my speaking journey, and I was at the National Speaker Association, like I mentioned to you, and someone said, Brandon, the best thing to do when you're looking at someone in that audience is imagine that you're speaking to the version of you before you knew what it is you know now, right? Imagine you're speaking to that version of you that you can now make an impact on and reach and give that information that you could have used at that time in your life. And it was the same thing with the camera. When I started making YouTube videos, I was instructed, and it was some great advice, to look in the camera lens, because it can seem empty, like looking at just a piece of equipment. But when you envision that you're not just looking into a camera lens, you're looking into the eyes of the past version of yourself, or the eyes of the person that you really, truly want to serve, it changes the entire vibe of that communication. And at the same time, I love how you said, look around. Are people on their phones? For those of us in the corporate world who frequently deliver presentations, if people are on their phones, I've seen a lot of people at the front of the room say, hey, everyone, we need to get off our phones. Come on, no social media, stop the texting, let's focus. But it's not their fault that they're on their phones. It's not their fault. Yeah, they're so conditioned by.
I mean, we're so used to that stimulating. Everything is about being stimulated. So you've got to figure out, how can I be more stimulating? So you made two distinctions there. You talked about looking into the camera. That's for when you're on video. But and I always, throughout my television career, I always imagined somebody on the other side of that camera. In my case, it was one of my aunts who was one of my biggest supporters, and I knew that if I did something wrong, she'd be there to critique me, etc. But I always envisioned I was talking to her. So I think it's really good to do that if you are doing an interview of some sort. Now, I want to caution you, if you're being interviewed by somebody else, you're not sure which camera is going to be on you. So you always want to keep your eyes on the interviewer in that situation. When you're on stage, here's a great thing about eye contact. because eyes are the gateway to the soul.
Hmm.
I want you to divide the audience into 3 pieces of pizza. And you start out by looking out to the, I take the centerpiece and I look straight at them when I'm beginning and I say, making this up, but I'm so grateful to be here today. I have the story that's going to change your life. After the end of that phrase, I turn to either the right or left and I give another phrase, and then I will turn to the other side of the audience and do another phrase. And then I start individually looking at people. That keeps them engaged. I'm sure many members of your audience have been to presentations or speeches or something where the person on stage may never look at the left side of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you feel? Completely left out. And by the way, so many of us in our virtual or hybrid situations now, where we might have meetings where, let's just say, we've got 5 people on a Zoom screen, and then we've got 5 people in the room. You got to make sure you're looking at those people that are there virtually as well, because I've had so many complaints that they feel left out.
How do you do that? How do you look at people in that virtual setting and include them as if they were there in person?
Well, one of the things you can do is it's simple body language. You can go to and a lot of these rooms that I've seen these things set up, and usually there's one big, large screen where you might have 5 or 6 people on it, something like that. Mm-hmm. So you can, and then there's people in the room that are probably sitting around the conference table, and you might be at this far side of it. So you can look at the people in the room, but then look up at the screen, and there's nothing wrong with individually calling them out. Hey, Sarah, you want anything to add? Or I saw you nodding. What do you think? It's obvious you're agreeing with me on this point. Can I have your thoughts? So be aware that they need to be included just like everybody else that's in the room. And it can be very disconcerting. We're in a little bit of a trying time with this stuff. So try it. See what you can make work, because you want them all to feel included and that they are important parts of whatever meeting or presentation or whatever it is that's going on.
That's a huge rabbit hole we could go down, and maybe we'll touch more on it, because even 3 years after Zoom became a very new and a very normal part of our culture and this idea of virtual meetings, I still see a lot of people who they're doing Zoom calls from their messy bedroom. They're doing Zoom calls with things behind them. They're dressed in pajamas and so many different things we could talk about. They've got a blurry camera. Their microphone's not that great. It's like, it's been 3 years now since this has been.
Get it together, folks.
Exactly. So maybe we could talk about that specifically, but it's fascinating to me how when you're in that room, a lot of the fear for me at the beginning when I started to give presentations was there's a lot of people in front of me. And that advice that you gave of looking at that group and splitting it into chunks in several ways, splitting into the 3 pieces, like you said, taking the large group of people and one group. And you can do that even if there's 300 people in the room, 500 people, right?
And it's so effective. And I'll tell you what happens. Like if there is somebody that's on their phone and you see them, you look over and you go, wow, I must be doing a great job. I see you're tweeting about me. And that gets their cool attention. But you can do fun things like that. Now it's really a conversation, because the audience knows that you're very aware of them, that you're very engaged with them, and that you're having fun. And you're not doing it in a mean way. You're just simply saying, hey, come on. Yeah. Listen up here, because I got something really good to tell you. When you call people out, I'm telling you, they stop.
Something I found helps too is just walking over and standing by them, like moving yourself physically to that side of the room. And when you're right next to them, they're going to be less apt to be on their phone. But again, if they're on their phone, then it's likely that we're not keeping them engaged. And there's one big pet peeve of mine, and I can guarantee it's one of yours too. It's when you go to a presentation and the individual is dry. The individual is not taking it seriously. The individual is treating it as a meeting that has to be done. And in my book, one of the reasons why I loved the role that I played for a long time inside of Verizon Wireless is I would help the leaders to be more engaging and look at it not just as a meeting that has to happen, but look at it as how can we provide the best experience for the people who are going to be here today, because they don't want to drive several hours to be here, stay overnight for a conference, whatever it might be. They truly want to be entertained, but people also don't expect to be entertained. So when it happens, you're leaving them with an emotional impression that they're going to remember for a long time. And we, as the communicator, have the opportunity to make that happen for them. But especially with TikTok nowadays, and the attention span going down and down from 8 seconds to 7 seconds. And in a year, it's probably going to be 5 seconds. It's just the reality. TikTok, Reels, Vines, all these different things are decreasing our attention span to where we're scrolling, we're getting the next hit, scrolling, getting the next hit. So that when we're in real conversation, if we as the communicators are waiting 30 seconds for a transition or something exciting to happen, we're going to lose their attention fast. How do you help, especially these executives who they don't believe communications, their most important thing to improve in? Like, how do you help these individuals engage people in this short attention span culture?
Well, there's a bunch of things that you just said in there that I'd want to unwrap. First of all, when you talk about leaders or presenters who are disengaged and are not really putting their all into the presentation, I'd like to scold them all, but that's not a good thing to do. But I want you to focus. I want people to think about this. You're there for a purpose. You're the expert in the room on whatever subject you are giving them. You should be not only giving them your all, but you should be excited about it and you should be purposeful. So focus on the purpose and remind yourself, you're the expert in the room. You may be the only person that can give them that kind of information in that moment. And so when you focus on that, it really helps you become a better presenter. Then I want you to put yourself in their shoes. What on earth would compel them to sit there and listen to you if you're, hello, I want to tell you today about this wonderful opportunity we have. I mean, come on. And then if you're not capable of being a good presenter, then just don't do it. You've got a job. You've got something you're supposed to be doing well. Do it. So focusing on purpose is important. Secondly, if you're doing things like making a presentation with slides, get rid of all that data that's on there because the human brain can't focus on it. Make it fun, make it lively, use a lot of images, which again will get people to go, wow, that was so cool. And then it's got to be interactive. And the way that you make it interactive is by making it a conversation, a real conversation. You're not the lecturer and they're not, and maybe they may be students of some sort in here, but in a professional world, they are peers, or they might even be bosses, or they might be people that are younger than you that you've got to help guide through it. So respect them, respect your audience. Give it your all. It's the least you can do. And by the way, most of the time you're getting paid to do it. Like, come on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. And I want to dive deeper into that if we can, because that fear of I'm about to give a presentation to 500 people or even 20 people, it really, the number, it's not the number. It's more so what we create in our mind as the picture of what's going to happen. It's generally when we think of ourselves talking to a lot of people at once. But when you do what you just said, engage other people, make it a conversation, that immediately drops that barrier of I need to perform, I need to interact and act at the front of this room. How can you make that presentation where it's you dispersing information and educating people?
Yeah.
How do you have some favorite ways to create engagement and conversation in the room and get everyone involved?
Do you have like 5 hours?
What are some of your favorites if you had to choose a few?
Okay, so first of all, let's start with the way we open, because that's where you grab them. So in television, I'm sure you're familiar with television newscasts where you'll hear this 15-second intro. Today, the man with 5 heads, 16 cats found in a blah blah blah, so you've got all this kind of grabber, these headlines. So think about what you're going to grab them with. So you want to start with what are you going to tell them, and why do they need to know it? So what's your headline? I want you to start with the headline. But the other things that can really work, you can incorporate that headline into like a rhetorical question. Something like, how many of you feel really good about making a presentation and never get nervous? I've got a captive audience because I'm going to tell you how not to be nervous and how to start right. So a rhetorical question, sometimes you can do a poll, but you get them engaged right off the top. It truly helps get rid of your nerves, makes you far more comfortable if you can do that because the attention's off of you in that moment. And secondly, you gain some information that can help you as you go through the presentation. I frequently start with when I'm, like when I'm doing a large group, for example, and it's a training, I will start with, okay, first thing, let's talk about our challenges in communicating. What are your challenges? And then and if nobody talks, I literally force them to. I go around the room and I say, hey, George, tell me what, last time you made a presentation, how was it? What went wrong? Give me. So I'm immediately gathering information because bottom line, I'm there to teach them something, and I don't want to be teaching them about, some kind of, maybe it's about gestures when they really want to know, how do I use my voice? So you gather great information. Sometimes, I'll tell you what I've recently been starting with. Not all the time, but it was kind of fun, especially in the middle of a big audience. I asked them this question. I say, what was Abraham Lincoln's most important speech? So what is it? His most memorable? What would you say?
The Declaration of Independence?
The Gettysburg Address.
Oh, yes. For all you history buffs, I apologize.
Which is what you meant. Okay, how long was it?
Oh, man. I'm not sure.
2 minutes. 272 words. One of the most impactful speeches ever given in the United States of America. To this day, we can still quote it. 7 years ago, or whatever it was. So anyway, my point is brevity.
Wow.
So when I can say that, it immediately sinks into people's heads. They're like, whoa, my last presentation went 35 minutes, and I don't know how impactful it was. So that means you have to think about, how do I prepare? How do I prep it? Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody do a 2-minute speech, because we're not going to learn anything. And obviously he was there giving a very important message about the start of the Civil War. But I think what's crucial is that we take what we're going to say, and then we practice. We edit. We and really think about, your audience. What is the key message you're going to say, and then how am I going to deliver it in a really impactful way? So those are ways that we can truly make a difference. And then you get into the whole body language aspect of things. You mentioned moving around over standing next to somebody who's on their phone. I suggest strategic movement in a room all the time. It can be as simple as moving from one side of the large television screen to the other. It can be as simple as the gestures that you use to bring something to life. We've already talked about the eye contact. It can be, I highly suggest you do not stand behind a podium if you're standing. Yeah. I also believe that standing makes us better speakers, because when we stand, our diaphragm, we breathe deeper, our voice is deeper, and tons of studies show the deeper our voice, the more credible we are. Yeah. And when you're standing, you can also make some good strategic movements. People say to me, I'm in a conference room, everybody's sitting. Well, you know what? If you stand up and move around the room, they've got to follow you. And suddenly they're interested. Mm-hmm. So things like that. That's especially important for women, because frequently there might be fewer women in the room, and we're also usually smaller. We don't take up as much space. So the more space you take up, the more people listen to you. Yeah. All kinds of simple little things. So there's just a ton of things that one can do. We have to kind of think about our situation, look at the area that we're going to be presenting in, if it's live, if it's in person. Think about how I'm going to react to this audience. And by the way, one other thing, which is also really simple, you want to dress for your audience. Okay. Think about this. So I had a client recently who said to me, I was making a presentation, and it was with a fintech firm, and these fintech firms are usually very casual. They might be in hoodies or in a vest, they have a little fleece vest over their t-shirt or whatever. Yeah. And he walked in a suit and tie. Yeah. Now, do you think, how much attention do you think they actually paid to him? Because the moment he walked in, they had this judgment of, oh, this guy's a stiff. Yeah. He completely doesn't get us. He doesn't dress like us. So that again involves a little prep work, a little due diligence about who am I speaking to and who are these people?
Yeah. It's like that old style speaking to a bunch of hipsters. It's like, who is this person up here speaking to us and giving us this information? Why should we listen to them? Because in their mind, this is an outsider talking
Right,
to us, not with
right.
us.
And we want somebody who's with us. We want to be of our people. We
Yeah.
want like-minded people. That's who we believe and listen to. So, and it's kind of like, wow, I didn't even think about that. This is my usual uniform. I'm going, well, ditch that uniform for this meeting because it didn't work.
I would like to point something out that's very important. I don't think I need to point it out. I think everyone listening and watching will see this and understand this immediately, and they'd agree with me. You are extremely vibrant and full of energy, and you own your space. Like even right now, like you're in front of that camera, you're positioned perfectly, so it's you. It's not like 90% background, 10% you. You're the way you talk, the way you present yourself, all very powerful because you've done this for so long. So for someone listening who's at the beginning, and maybe it is a lady at the front of the room who's like, I don't know how to own that space. I don't know how to move around the room. I am smaller than everyone else in that room. Like, how can I become confident and vibrant like you? Like, was there a moment, and I know this is kind of a loaded question, was there a moment when in your communication journey, maybe at the beginning, or you tell me, that you realize I've got to work on this because I really have to start owning my space and present myself powerfully? Like, what was that moment? When did that begin for you?
It began with my very first job in television. And mind you, when I was in college, I did internships and that sort of thing. But I remember, and this was before, I hate to say it, before we had smartphones. But so I would literally go into the large bathroom at the television studio, and I would practice in front of a mirror. And I would practice different kinds of emotions on my face, my facial expressions. I would practice just, looking at myself. In today's world, you can take your little old phone and record yourself. I mean, it's so easy and it's so effective. Record yourself. Try delivering something in different ways and see what looks best for you. Now, I guarantee you the first few times you do it, you're going to hate yourself because we're so self-critical. We're so ridiculously self-critical. But you'll go, oh, I hate my voice. Oh, I can't stand the way I look. Well, get rid of that. Like, forget about it. This is about getting yourself better. So record yourself, look at it. Nobody else in the world ever has to see it unless you're so darn good you want to show it at the family event that following weekend.
Yeah.
But practice, and you'll look at it and you'll say, I love the way I said that. That was really effective. But I hated the way I do this, because I have people self-assess all the time. And when you're pushed to do it, you'll say, I'm talking too fast. I'm not taking any pauses. By the way, the pause is the best thing you can do to be more credible. Time it takes to tap your foot, which I just did. You will discover that it just really helps you. It ups your game. So that's one great thing to do. Another thing, and I mean, you asked me about my moments. I've had many a moment when I was, on television early on where I would be, oh my God, that was awful. How could I do that? So I would look at the tape, I would review it, I would assess it, and I think, what could I have done better? It's about self-critique. I also want you to think about something else. And I learned this very early on in the world of TV, and doing Zooms or doing StreamYards like we're doing right now, or anything. This inanimate object, the camera that's right here on this laptop, drains us of about 30% of our energy. So
Wow.
we have to amplify. That's what people in television have done for years. So think about amplifying it. And there's one little trick exercise that I do with nearly everybody.
Okay.
I make them be overly dramatic as I'm taping it, because I always tape everything and then we play it back, and that's how we learn and grow. I tape their mock presentations, I tape mock interviews, I tape creating mock videos, etc. And we look back at it. So what I have them do is be incredibly dramatic. I say, I want you to be so uncomfortable that you're sweating. And then we look at it, and amazingly, 5/6 of the time, that overly dramatic bit of video looks better than anything they've done throughout the entire session. and they look at it and they're shocked. So I'm not suggesting that you be overly dramatic, but what I am suggesting is you play around with it, because what it teaches us is we can do more than we are. And we can experiment and we can be more dynamic, and it's not going to make us look silly or stupid. It works super well.
And there was that pause again right there. And I love that pause. That pause is powerful. Let me tell you, me and a couple colleagues went to the 10X Growth Conference in 2019, I believe it was. Great conference and amazing presenters. You know, Jesse Itzler was there. Sarah Blakely was there. One of the most impactful speeches that day and conversations was Elena Cardone, Grant Cardone's wife, because there was the humongous echo in the room when everyone was talking. So everyone had to slightly adjust how they were speaking. But Elena would just make a statement and then she'd pause for a minute, and not a minute, but, you know, slightly longer than what you paused to let the echo subside. And then she kept doing that and she kept doing that. And it kept me engaged because I was like, what is she going to say next? Where is this going? And I think that's one of my greatest fallacies, is not pausing enough when I'm making a point. I'm a fast talker, so I go right to the next. And that's something that I'm going to take the foot tap. So it's literally you stop talking and you physically tap your foot once. Is that what it is?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. So here's the deal about the pauses. We are afraid of blank air. We feel like it's deadly, that if we don't fill that space, something's going to happen. It is the most successful reporter's trick and interviewer's trick in the world, is somebody finishes talking and answering a question, and I just sit there longer than the time it takes to tap a foot. I sit there for a couple of seconds, and that person rushes to fill the gap, and it's exactly when they say things they don't want to say, because they're not thinking, because they're all of a sudden going, oh, I gotta talk, I must not have done a good job with that question. I gotta finish it. And then they'll say something that they didn't mean to say.
Yeah.
And it's not deliberate, but it's just, and sometimes I just want what somebody said to sink in. So if we allow that moment where it makes certain phrases of what you say very important. So that pause allows me, the audience, to then take it in. It also is a sign of a good listener. And this is a two-way street. Listening is the other thing you need to do really well in all of this.
Yeah. And that's communication as much as talking and speaking is communication. And to wrap up the pausing, I heard a quote a while ago that I really liked. I forget who said it. I'm sure we can look it up. The music is in the spaces between the notes, right? That's where the real impact is. And you said a few things that I want to unpack. One thing specifically, that idea of the first video you make, the first presentation you give, it's not going to be nearly as good as your second. It's not going to be nearly as good as your third or your 20th or your 100th. Are you familiar with the YouTuber Mr. Beast?
No.
Okay.
I gotta find
he's actually the #1 YouTuber on the platform. He makes these crazy out of this world videos that he gives away $1 million, gives away $500,000. Like he does some crazy things. Definitely look him up. I think you'd really like it. But he has been on YouTube for about 8 years, maybe a little bit longer. And he said, giving YouTube advice, he said the first 100 videos is literally the tutorial. The first 100 presentations is the beginning. Like you're not even going to be good at that point. It's a matter of just going out there and doing it. I think Toastmasters really helped me in that effort. And I can only imagine what having someone like you in my corner who was there solely to help me improve would do for my performance. So I want to talk about what it looks like to work with someone like you who's been in this field for decades, who can help me personally. I want to talk about that with you here in a minute. But that essence of the self-critique when you're rewatching a video. And by the way, guys, the video, it's not just you rewatching a video you shot on your phone. A lot of the presentations you give, especially in the corporate world, might be recorded. And you have the opportunity to go and re-listen to that and rewatch it. And I've had a lot of conversations with leaders who say, oh, I could never rewatch that. That's the last thing.
Doesn't that slay you when they say that? Oh,
yeah, because it's painful. It can be painful. I remember I went to a Dale Carnegie course, and after every presentation, they brought you in the hallway one-on-one, and they replayed the video. And the advice they gave was, I want you to watch this person in the video who's presenting as if it was a third party. And I want you to critique them as if it wasn't you that you're watching. And name the good things. And then they would ask for one area of improvement.
Mhm.
How do you critique yourself in a way where you're not over criticizing, but in a way that's actually constructive for your growth?
Well, I think one good idea is to focus on one part of it. Now, I want to say something about an overall effect too. I use this Maya Angelou quote in every single one of my trainings, which is, people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Communicating is all about feeling. Usually you're giving a presentation, making a speech, doing an interview because you want to persuade somebody to do something. How do you persuade them? You make them feel that it's the right thing for them, be it buying a book or taking some kind of action or whatever it is. So when you're looking at your own videos, what's the feeling you're taking away from it? So think about that feeling first. Are you indeed delivering the sale? Are you indeed making me feel that you've got my best interests at heart and what you're doing will it's effective? So think about that overall kind of feeling that you get from what you're doing, for starters. Then each time I might focus on one thing. Am I delivering this for the right audience? Or how am I using my voice? Did my voice sound like it was too high, too low? Did I pause? So look for one thing, maybe two things. Don't look at everything, because then you're going to become way too critical. So each time it's just think of one thing that you did that you'd like to improve, and one thing that you feel like you did really well.
Yeah.
I liked what you said about the Dale Carnegie, I think it was Dale Carnegie course, with the three good things and one bad. I call that 3 stars and a wish. And
cool.
that's a really good way of kind of self-critiquing yourself, because it means that now you've got both positive and a tiny bit of negative. Because if we're just going to be so negative, we're going to be like, oh, I can't do this, I can't. But if we just look at it with just, I just want one thing that I've done really well that I did better than the last time.
Yeah, I love that advice. You're not just looking at everything. You're looking at what's one thing, and then the next time, what's another thing, and then the next time, what's another thing. And then 10 presentations in, you're a completely different presenter than you were during the first one, because you've made the conscious effort to get better.
And I also find that people, they grow expeditiously. It's you do it once and you go, that wasn't so bad. I mean, I got through it. Maybe your first goal is just to get through it. And then the second one, you're thinking, oh, I liked how I started. I really got people's attention. Okay, now and then it starts to expand and grow so much, so quickly. I see growth so quickly in this area because, frankly, most people they never focus on it. Yeah. And if you take the time to focus on it, it's like anything else. You want to have a better golf game. You want to play tennis better. You want to whatever it is. You have to devote some time to it.
Yeah.
And think about it. I see people who will go out and practice their golf game every single week, but do they ever practice how they're giving presentations? No.
It's true.
And what's that old adage about you have to do something 10,000 times before you become good at it?
Yeah. Absolutely right. It's the same thing with this. And we can look at this differently because it's one of the top fears that people have is to speak to a group of people. But it's no different than tying your shoes. The first time you couldn't do it, you just can't remember when you couldn't tie your shoes. But there was a time that you also didn't know how to walk and you fell over and over and over and over. And, your parents probably laughed as you fell, but you don't remember that because you were so young. And this is the same thing. So
absolutely. So true.
People can take away a lot of value working with someone like yourself in a one-on-one setting. And a lot of people don't even know that that's something that's available to them out there. So I'd love to ask you, who are the kinds of people who will take the most value out of working with you one-on-one in order to improve their presentation skills? And what does that look like?
The answer to who gained value from it, anybody who talks. Um, and I mean, bottom line is a lot of this stuff you can use in your personal life, in your professional life. And it's also really good as you go, even as you go meet people. Some of these skills can be used at a party. They can be used in a professional gathering. They can be used at a conference. They can be used over Zoom. They're for anybody who wants to become a better communicator in order to enhance their life. So what my trainings look like, I do them one-on-one. I do large groups. I do medium-sized groups. I give presentations at conferences. I mean, literally, there's no audience I don't speak to. So we began by assessing, what do you need? What are your goals? Where are you right now? And what's the best thing that's going to take you forward? Then we work on, I show them best practices. I give them demonstrations of, here's somebody who pauses really well. Here's somebody with great strategic movement. Here's somebody who's using their voice in an amazing way. Here's a way to create great substance in an easy, almost formulaic manner. Here's how to tell a story. And because stories resonate, they're remembered 22 times more often than not. So The more you can tell stories, the stories are really important. We just can't retain data as much as we can if you're telling a story. Even though great pieces of data are important, significant numbers can be great. But if you give too many numbers, people walk out going, what Brandon say? What was that number again? I forgot. Yeah. So you need to make sure that you do that wisely. So we work on that, and then we start doing mock presentations or mock interviews, or we'll talk about how they're creating videos, and we'll do, we're basically rehearsing. So we do that, we play it back. We do it, we play it back. We do it, we play it back. And so it's a series of exercises and repetitions. I do that little dramatic thing I talked about. I've got a few other, little tricks up my sleeve about how I can help people get super comfortable. Cool. And if it depends, sometimes it's just they want it for an overall, just in general, or sometimes it's because they've got, a very particular presentation coming up that's important. Maybe they're about to do a great interview on like a CNBC or a Bloomberg or the Today Show or for the Wall Street Journal or any major national kind of publication or media platform. And sometimes they want to create videos because they know that's really going to help them in promoting their own work. And I really help them in how do I do the best job with my audience in mind and who I want to reach and where it's going to appear. So that's pretty much what it looks like. We can do, it's customized. Everything I do is completely customized. So you can have one session, you can have a session a week, you can do whatever you want. It depends upon your time, your budget, etc.
It sounds like it's a very holistic approach based on the outcome that specific communicator is looking to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Cool. I love that. I wish that I knew about this when I started my communications journey, but even at the middle of the journey, the top of the journey, there's always more that you can grow and improve. So whether you're someone just beginning or you're somebody who does deem yourself as a great communicator, maybe other people tell you that, or you've just been doing this a while, there's always more value you can take out of this one-on-one coaching aspect. How can people best get a hold of you and follow you to learn more about that and also to contact you?
Well, I have a website that's called janehanson.com. It's HANSON. And there's a contact area in there, but you can also read a lot more about that. I also write some articles for Forbes Women. So sometimes you can reach me through that venue. And my email is very simple. It's Jane, Jane, at janehanson.com. So all of those are ways in which anybody can reach me. And I have various, it's like I said, it's all customized. So I think people will really get a kick out of being able to do what they want to do in their own time, at their own pace, and with their own budget in mind.
Yes. Something I notice about you is you like to keep things simple. And I think that simplifying this makes it that much easier to take a look at it and realize I can improve here. I mean, even in your website and your email, it's just simple. You don't complicate things, right? And I think that's really important in this world of communication.
That is the key to good communication is keeping it simple, making sure it's understandable, and making sure it's relatable. Those are the three most important things we need to do. And then we add to that, of course, how are you making me feel?
Yes, right back to that. I love that. Jane, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really happy we had this conversation, and I know that it made a difference for so many people who are listening and watching. So thank you for your time and for what you've given us.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful. I love what you're doing. I love that intro too.
Thank you very much. You take care. Thank you, Jane.
You too. See you next time.
Like I mentioned, no matter what stage of your communication journey that you are in, Jane Hanson's got something for you. I mean, we spoke for about 40 to 45 minutes right now, and she just kept coming at you with tip, strategy, but also the simple philosophies of keep things simple. Remember how you make people feel. The idea of practice, edit, practice, critique yourself, but in a loving way, right? Just the same way you'd critique someone that you didn't want to hurt, right? Treat yourself the same way. And remember, it's all about the next one and the next one and one more presentation and one more presentation. And you'll eventually become great. And eventually you'll become a master. And if you want to get to that state of mastery even faster, then you should absolutely reach out to Jane Hanson at janehanson.com, as well as jane@janehanson.com. That's her email address. So you can check out and see if Jane's services and coaching will make sense for you. I hope you loved this conversation. If you did, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. This show has grown the way it has over the past 2 years because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.